Major events have just emerged directly from the heart of the American judicial system, and what is unfolding now carries a historical weight that is difficult to ignore. The Chief Justice of the United States took the unusual initiative of publicly addressing a controversial request made by President Donald Trump involving the attempted removal of a federal judge. This statement was not just another common institutional note. It was laden with meaning and served as a firm reminder of the foundations that underpin the country's democratic structure. By stating that over 200 years it has been established that impeachment should not be used as a response to disagreements about judicial decisions, and that there is an appropriate path for this, which is the appeal system, the Chief Justice not only reaffirmed an essential principle, but also sent a direct and impossible-to-ignore message. This position gained even more repercussion considering the history of the relationship between Trump and members of the judiciary, especially since at other times he had demonstrated trust and even closeness with certain figures on the Supreme Court. But now the scenario is different. What we see is growing tension, an intense emotional reaction, and an escalation of events that seem to be spiraling out of control. Meanwhile, on the other hand, outside the institutions, the climate is also rapidly deteriorating. Inflamed supporters gather, consumed by a mixture of indignation, fear, and unconditional loyalty, believing they are defending something greater, but at the same time contributing to an environment of instability. The scenes that emerge show confrontations, barriers being breached, and security forces trying to contain the advance of a crowd that refuses to retreat. The irony becomes evident when many of those who defend order find themselves in direct conflict with those responsible for maintaining it, revealing a profound contradiction that exposes the degree of tension that has taken hold of the situation. What is happening is not just an isolated reaction, but rather the result of an accumulation of decisions, speeches, and conflicts that have been intensifying over time within the Supreme Court. The scenario is also one of division. The recent decision shows a fragmented court where distinct ideological views clash clearly. On one side, a conservative majority upholding a line of reasoning that favors certain understandings of presidential immunity, and on the other, a liberal minority reacting firmly, pointing out serious risks in this interpretation. The most forceful criticism comes from Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who expresses concern about the fact that this interpretation could place the president in a position above the law, something that directly violates the fundamental principles of the democratic system. This divergence is not merely technical. It reflects a broader dispute about the limits of power and how the Constitution should be interpreted in times of crisis. At the same time, it is impossible to ignore the political impact of this decision, which in practice results in significant delays in processes that could have direct consequences on the electoral landscape. This creates a suspension effect where everything seems to be on hold while the country attentively observes the next steps. This feeling of uncertainty further fuels tension in the streets and strengthens narratives on both sides. While some see a strategic victory, others see a dangerous precedent that could compromise the balance of power. To fully understand what is happening, it is necessary to go back a few months to when a specific episode initiated this sequence of events. In March 2025, a court decision temporarily blocked actions related to deportation policies, which provoked an immediate and intense reaction from Trump, who used a social media to directly attack the judge responsible, demanding his removal. This attitude broke with traditional norms of institutional respect and raised the level of conflict. A few hours later came the Chief Justice's response, which directly and bluntly reaffirmed the limits of presidential power at that moment, led many to perceive that something unusual was happening, as such pronouncements are extremely rare, especially coming from the highest authority in the judiciary. This episode served as an initial landmark, a turning point that triggered a series of chain reactions both inside and outside the institutions. Since then, each new event seems to further amplify the feeling that the system is being tested at its historical limits. The memory of old precedents, such as the case of Samuel Chase at the beginning of the 19th century, reinforces the idea that the impeachment of judges has always been treated with extreme caution and that its misuse can open dangerous doors. By ignoring these traditions, there's a risk of weakening structures that took centuries to consolidate. Meanwhile, the central figure in this entire narrative continues to react intensely, demonstrating frustration with decisions that are not in his favor and constantly questioning the legitimacy of institutions that were once part of his power strategy. This change in posture contributes to an even more polarized environment where every action is interpreted as part of a larger battle and where public trust in institutions becomes an increasingly fragile element. In the streets, the energy is chaotic. People gather, driven by strong emotions, some believing they are fighting for justice, others simply following the crowd without fully understanding what is at stake. The images show a scenario that mixes protest, revolt, and disorder, creating a complex portrait of a divided country. Faced with all this, an inevitable question arises: what comes next? The answer is still uncertain, but one thing is clear. Current events are not isolated. They are part of a larger process that is redefining the dynamics between power, politics, and justice in the United States. And the outcome of this story is still being written with each decision, each demonstration, and each reaction that arises in this constantly transforming scenario where nothing seems completely stable and where each movement can trigger unpredictable consequences. Their stories will echo for a long time in the country's history.